So those of you on ham radio YouTube know that I am one of the famous people, but this guy here is very famous on YouTube. Probably.
Infamous. I would say probably the term should be infamous.
So you see his call sign, K1OIK. This is Burt Fisher. Burt Fisher is somebody who I wanted to talk to for a long time, okay? In a good way, okay? So Burt has some very interesting views on amateur radio. We're probably going to talk about a few of them. But first, Burt, what got you into this hobby?
Okay, when I was 13 years old, I got a Heathkit transoceanic radio.
Okay.
And I started listening to shortwave, and I listened to Radio Moscow. And of course, that was the time at the height of the Cold War. And I wrote them a letter challenging how they enslaved Hungary, Czechoslovakia. And they answered me. And then I started listening elsewhere on the shortwave bands. And I came across the ham radio bands, and I started listening to them. That was AM, in the 8 days of AM. And one of the odd things that struck me out is, why is this guy saying hi, hi in the middle of a conversation? I couldn't understand that. But then I met this fellow by the name of Dan Carter, W-A-2-E-K-C, who is no longer a ham. And he was my elmer. And my mother did not want to let him in the house. Can you figure out one reason?
That's a tool call. Where were you at the time?
Englewood, New Jersey.
You're a Jersey boy.
Yes.
Holy smokes.
Yeah,
okay.
my mother did not want to let him in the house, and because my previous friend, from age 6 to 12, my mother wouldn't let in the house, and that's based solely on color. And so my mother didn't want to let Dan in the house, but by the time you get to be 14...
Wait, based on color? What do you mean?
He was black.
That's disgusting.
It is.
That people would do that. Well, I guess back then probably was.
You have to remember, this is 1958, 59. So, but when you get to be 14 instead of 6 or 7, you're bigger.
Yeah.
And so I told my mother he's coming in the house. And so he turned out to be a great guy, much smarter than me, and he elmered me into ham radio. I had a chance to meet him about 6 or 7 years ago in New York City, and he's still alive, and we had a great conversation. He's not into ham radio, but that's what basically got me in.
Yeah, I'm a member of OMIC, and I always, like to promote them because they're an organization that actually fought against that same thing you're talking about, where they're a group of black hams who used to travel. They drove around, and people didn't want to talk to them because they're black, and they don't want to help them find places for lodging and accommodation.
Yeah, I ran into that when I was in the military, because I was stationed in Biloxi, and when the bus pulls in, there's a sign that says for the water fountain, colored and white. And I remember going in there, and some little 5-year-old girl, she goes over to drink in the colored fountain. She was white, but she couldn't read. And she goes over to drink in the colored fountain, and her mother yells at her and says, "You can't drink in that fountain." And the girl had already drank in some water. And she said, "Why? The water tastes the same." Well, she hadn't learned prejudice yet.
You learned that stuff. Okay. So that got you into ham radio. Well, you told your story about ham radio. What do you do today in ham radio?
Today in ham radio, I just bought an Elecraft K4 back in March.
Right.
And so I get on the air. I had a rag chew yesterday with a fellow on sideband. We talked for about an hour.
Wow.
I despise contests, and for the reason that first of all, they squish out those of us that are not contesters, and then they lie with signal reports.
You're 5'9", Bert.
You're 5'9". Everybody's 5'9". Okay. However, I do understand that many years ago, W5YI had covered me when I had petitioned the FCC to set out a segment of the band for contesters. 75% of a band segment would be for contesters, and of course that failed. So I pretty much, people will say, well, use the work bands, and in my town we have the worst beaches on Cape Cod, and I'll say to them, yeah, the work bands are the worst bands. Put the contests on the work bands and give us the regular bands. And I do CW. I am not very good at it. When I was a kid, I could copy about 13 to 15, which was the requirement then. And then I got up to about 20. But after 62 years as a ham, you would think that I could copy better than 20. But I still do CW. I do QRP. This time of the year, I go outside and take a ICOM 705. I'll take it to the beach. And in that sense, maybe I do kind of like a contest in the sense because you can make, contesters will pick you up fairly easy.
Right.
And so I do like that.
Yeah, So yeah, look, I mean, I do contesting. I'm not like an obsessive contester, right? And I do more. I do the major ones sometimes, but I don't. I do think that you're right about some things. That some contesters, they just don't care, right? They're rude, some of them, and some of them like they just step on you. And maybe we should have the work bands open and then leave the regular band. But I think what happened was the agreement that was given back when I think it was like when the 70s.
Probably into the 80s, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was late 70s. WRC 76, I think.
Okay, maybe you're right.
Yeah, and then I think we finally got the bands in the 80s, right? At the early 80s. So that was probably the genesis of it. But yeah, that aside, I mean, I watched some of your other videos talking about how, youth should be involved in sports and stuff like that. I agree that you should be involved in sports. Not all sports. I mean, I'll level with you. I'm not a big fan of football because I think it's violent.
That's true. But my point is, the reason I do QRP work is I think it's idiotic for a man, and it's almost always a man, be sitting in a little room on a beautiful day and playing with his ham radio. And so that's why I take it outside. I was at Town Neck Beach in Sandwich a few weeks ago, and I was operating, and a little boy, 8 years old, comes up to me and wants to know what he's doing. Now, he was with a group of 15 people,
right?
All his relatives, but he was the only one that had any guts. And I wanted to use another word, but he was the only one that had some guts to come up. And he asked what I was doing, and so I spent some time with him, and then I went over and spoke to the 15 other people who didn't have the guts or cojones to come over. And then as soon as he left, a 16-year-old teenage girl came up, and I talked to her for a while about ham radio. Now, and then I wound up being on the beach probably 3 hours, talking 2 hours to people on the beach. Now, most hams would consider that an interruption, but I'm a teacher. And my job is to teach. And so, we hear a lot of these people talking about, promoting ham radio. I don't talk about promoting ham radio. You don't well, I guess you do talk about it, but you promote it.
Look, that's what I do in the ARRL. That's one of the things I have to do. I like promoting amateur radio. But you have your style, I have mine.
Okay, but I see, it was, to me, with kids, now I have some, I have some negative comments on the habits of hams, although I think hams have generally very good character. But whenever I talk to kids about ham radio, you will never hear me say anything negative about it. Because in the classroom, I do a lot of Morse code. So I will say, give me your name, and I'll give it to them in Morse code. Kids love that. They love that. And then I had taken a KX3 outside with the kids. This is fourth grade, and we were having a lot of trouble making a voice contact. So I said to them, I could probably do it better on Morse code. I'll probably have more of a chance of talking to somebody.
You see, Bert, you and I agree more than we disagree, okay? Because what you've told me there is the exact same thing. And I will tell people this, okay? The habits of some of these grown men in ham radio are atrocious. But you will never hear me tell kids that how ham radio sucks. You will hear me tell kids that ham radio is a wonderful scientific pastime, that, yes, you could get out and operate an appliance, but I got into ham radio because I'm a nerd, okay? I got into ham radio because I like to tinker with things. And not only that, there's a great potential to go outdoors. I like to hike in the woods. Okay.
That's good.
I have my ICOM 705. I could throw up an end fed, and I make contacts that way.
That's a big positive. And
Yeah.
I teach mostly elementary school, and so we'll do phonetics as well. So I'll give
Right.
them their names in phonetics. I don't know if you can guess. There's one phonetic letter they laugh at. You have any guesses as to which one it is?
Not kilo, not Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta.
Go to the end of the alphabet.
Yankee.
No. One more.
Zulu.
No. Oh, it's one. X, Y, Z. No, it's W, whiskey.
Whiskey.
Yeah, they'll all laugh
Why?
at that then. And I had one kid that was a real problem in class. But when I saw him in the middle school, he came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Hotel Oscar Lima Delta Echo November." And so that stuck with him. So you never know what sticks with a kid.
Ah, yeah, Yeah, my kids look up to what I do in amateur radio, and they're working on their licenses, but their academic program is really rigorous at school. They go to a private school, and they push them hard.
Well, I've met them. I did have the opportunity to meet them. I love talking to kids.
Right.
And my daughter did get licensed when she was 8, and I didn't push her into it. In fact, when she came up to me, she said, "I want to get a license." I said, "Then you're going to study 1 hour a day, no help from me, and then I'll help you with the Morse code because and after the 30 days, no days off." And she did, and she wound up passing. And then she was on the air for a couple of years, operated W1AW, and she got into the magazine. Now You're Talking. There was ARL had a thing how to promote getting kids to get licensed, and it was called Now You're Talking.
So you're a real Bert. This is a side of you I've never seen.
Well, you see, but I need to point out to you, 95%. I have about 500 videos on YouTube, and most of them are demonstrations of equipment I buy.
The Ameritron amplifier one I've seen. Yeah.
People criticize me on that one, but most of them are positive. They're demonstration. But of the 95% that are positive, the 5% that are negative get more views than the other 95%.
That's how YouTube works.
Well, that's probably how society works in a sense. Yep.
Yeah, no, because it's a rubbernecker syndrome, right? Like one of my videos is why you can't have CB and ham radio in one video, and I basically trash CB radio, and CBers saying how you guys want to operate illegally. That thing got 50,000 views. Okay.
Yeah.
I did another one about why I need a GMRS license, and then I said because it does things a ham license doesn't do. That one got 120,000 views.
Gee, it's the negativity does pick it up, but
it wasn't on purpose though.
But as there's a fellow on QRZ that's always criticizing me, never said a positive thing about me, and it all has to do basically with more technology, not my comments on ham radio, and but he's never been interviewed by. There's a guy over in Israel that does interviews.
Eric Guth.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was scheduled to do a presentation here on Sunday about the truth, what I call truth in ham radio, and I canceled the presentation because I didn't want to stay over on Sunday. So I didn't do it. But Eric had me on. He runs a seminar. What does he do? Sort of an expo.
I'm presenting at the expo.
Okay, so he ran one, and I presented. He said, "You got to be positive." I said, "I'm going to be who I am," and so we did the presentation, and I figured I had about 20 or 25 questions. So I asked them, "How many people were there? Were there 25, 30, 35? Would you like to guess how many?" He told me.
1,000.
Yeah, 909.
Yeah.
So. People want to hear, and I get a lot of comments from people that appreciate what I say, but I also get a lot of comments, usually not in person. You never hear it in person about people who agree with my opinions. But hams are, when it comes to character, they're pretty good.
So I will tell you that ham radio in many respects, and in many respects, it doesn't reflect society, right? I think the ham crowd tends to trend a little older, right? And a little
A
more,
little.
well, a little older, a little more white, and, things that go along with that. I don't have anything against people of any particular, demographic, but I kind of wish ham radio was a little more diverse, and I do take positive steps in that direction. I try to encourage women, minorities, and others, Not to say that I don't encourage everybody. I have a lot of students who fall into traditional, well, not when I mean students, like a teacher. I mean like people I teach about amateur radio, right? Who fall into the traditional ham demographic. But what I do is, like, if I see somebody who is, outside demographic, I put a little extra, because I figure, why not make them see that this place is for them as well,
Yeah, I understand that, but when I was in high school, we had a ham radio club, and we had about 15 members in it. You don't see that anymore. When I got into ham radio, the average age of a ham was 27. Mm-hmm. The average age now is probably in the 60s. Yeah, is in the 60s. So it's become an old person's hobby, because the technology is different.
It's a retirement.
It is a retirement.
Like even in Trinidad, which is where I'm from, the local emergency management agency says, ham radio is a hobby for retired engineers.
Yeah. Well, one of my things that I really get ticked off at, when someone says, not when they say ham radio is a hobby, when they say it's just a hobby. Because if you look at Part 97 from the FCC regulations, hobby is not listed in there. We're supposed to provide a service. And the fact that you educate people, that's a service. And the fact that I do the same, or if I talk to someone on the beach about it, that's a service. If you cover a race, that's a service. Sitting on your butt and cackling on a contest, I find it hard to be a service.
So, I agree with you in many respects on that. Where I depart from most of ham radio is, people tell me that how if you're into ham radio, you have to be into MCOM, emergency communications, emergency drills, and I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I do, like emergency. I do like to help out. I used to be involved with ARIES and RACES and such like that. I had a New Jersey first responder ID card for ham, which is kind of ridiculous for ham radio, because we're not first responders, right?
Right.
But the sheriff's office did that for us anyway. And then that said, I do think that there's a lot of value in all of Basis and Purpose, the teaching, the science, the public service, but not only that, the international goodwill, the enjoyment.
Yeah. The international goodwill does not extend to contests. But wow. I was talking to a guy in Greece some time ago, and we were talking a lot about Greece and the country, and he was talking about our country as well. And some hams kept breaking in, trying to work them. And he finally said, "I'm taking the call of everyone here, and I will promise never to work you." And then I had worked a fellow in Japan. I think it's JA1EYN. I had worked him, and he said he was coming to Boston, and he said maybe we could have an eyeball QSO, and we did. And he brought his children down the Cape Cod, and they slept over our house. And my daughter was 7 at the time. He slept over at the house, and when we invited him in the house, I said, "We'll sleep in the basement. And you can sleep in our bedroom." He said, "No, we've never slept below ground before. We want to sleep below ground." The children, even though the children did not speak the other's language, they played for 2 or 3 days with no problem. And then we later stayed at his apartment in Cambridge, because he was a fellow, or whatever they call that, for a year up at MIT. So
that's really interesting. So we talked about you and ham radio and such like that, and your views on ham radio. What do you do outside of ham radio?
Okay. Sports. Thursday I play softball.
Okay.
And
So wait, you're a guy playing softball?
well, yeah, you said it's senior softball. It's
Okay.
called slow pitch. So the ball comes in like this and goes down like that.
I know girls play softball. Okay?
No, no, it's girls softball is a lot different. It's
I know,
fast.
I know.
It's fast pitch.
Yeah.
So I play softball. They had put me in left field, and I said to them, you guys are crazy,
Yeah.
because I'm the worst fielder out there. But apparently the other fielders were actually worse. And I biked the softball because you don't get much hiking or much exercise in softball. At least you
Okay.
didn't until they started using me as a runner.
Oh,
Because
no.
in softball, the guys are so old. We have a guy that was 88 years old, so I can substitute run for him.
Yeah.
So they started using. So I'm getting more exercise, and it's been hot recently. So I haven't been biking as much to softball.
Yeah.
So I do use softball. I do play volleyball. It's inside volleyball. So I do some other things.
I like.
And I watch too much TV.
I don't watch TV anymore. I do a lot of outdoors. Like I hike. I have woods behind my house, so I hike
Yeah.
there. Sometimes I hike the trails. We have an Appalachian trail nearby.
Oh, that's great. I'd
Yeah.
love to. I could go half a day on it.
Yeah. No, I like that. I used to be much into martial arts. I'm not into that anymore. But I still know it. I just, I'm just not like into competitions and stuff anymore. Like I used to be in competitions, and I kind of broke somebody's foot one time. But
In competition? Yeah.
yeah, that was kind of like I got a little scared after that because the person threatened to sue me.
Oh, that's.
But they signed a waiver.
Yeah. Well, I used to climb mountains. I haven't done that in about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I'd bring a handheld up with me. We didn't have QRP. At least I didn't have anything small enough.
Summit's on the air.
Summit's on the air. At my age now, I worry about dying of a heart attack up there.
Oh no.
So although I've seen people older than me climb, but my daughter, I wanted to climb Mount Washington. My daughter said to me, "You'll die."
Not with your vehicle, right? 'Cause
No, not with the vehicle. I have done it with the vehicle, but I
Okay.
wanted to climb it.
Okay.
And then so she sent me to there's a mountain in southern New Hampshire that's Monadnock.
Right.
That's very popular, and I went up that, but it's a slow haul up there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think I'm ever gonna do like climb Everest or one of those big mountains, but I probably would like to go out west and do some hiking, but with that, I will definitely have my ham radio because you never know if you run into trouble. Of course, I'll have GPS and SOS beacons and such like that, like the Garmin InReach, because that's the most reliable. But ham radio is also a good thing. But yeah, no, that's good.
I hiked at the Arizona. My sister lived in Arizona, and I hiked near the Arizona border and the difference here in New England, there's trees everywhere as you're hiking up. But there you're hiking in the clear most of the time. But the problem there was I was right on the Mexican border, and there was a barbed wire. I just jumped over. I walked over to the Mexican side,
Oh, no.
ate my lunch, and came back over. Because, there's no in parts of Arizona. It's very easy to go over the border.
Yeah. There's like, and the Federales, they're nowhere around.
No, there's nobody.
Yeah.
There was nobody. I hate to say this, but I ate my lunch and threw my trash over on the Mexican side. So I'm sorry about
That's
that.
an ugly American attitude.
That is an ugly American attitude. That's true.
So one more final thing for asking, a final question. This isn't a sign call, is it?
It's no, it's my original call. Almost.
Okay.
I got it in April 1960. When I was in New Jersey and got my original license, which was WVTJ&H. And then that was the time when you moved. You had to get a new call.
Yeah.
But this is the only time I'm going to go for I have an extra class license. The only time I'd go for a vanity call is if W1AW becomes available. I don't think it's going to come available soon, but that's the only time I'm going to change.
David Minster saying, anyway, I wouldn't get into that.
Well, I talked to him earlier. He's a nice guy. He was a really nice guy.
Yeah, you know, I mean, he came to me originally asking if he could be CEO of the ARRL. I'm like, yeah, if you have what it takes, sure. And it turns out he did.
Yeah.
So anyway, what is the advice you would give someone wanting to get into ham radio today?
I would be hard pressed to give anybody advice to get into it because I feel it has now. When I talk to kids, I don't. I'm trying to think of a better word, but I don't BS them,
Right.
and I don't think it's. I don't think it offers anything for them.
Okay.
And so I won't. You won't hear me. You won't see me telling even a 10-year-old you did great when you didn't. But the opposite of it is that kids will come up to me and said, "What do you think of their draw?" You know, they'll come up with a drawing, and I'll say, "What do you think of?" And I say, "Well, why don't you ask the art teacher?" The art teacher won't tell me the truth. You will. And then I'll say to the kid, "Well, that's a pretty good drawing. I could never do that."
Well, what I will tell you is that that's spot on, and I think that how you shouldn't really be pushing people into amateur radio. They have to like it themselves, you know.
Right.
You know. So anyway, Bert, this was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I've dreamed of having this interview all my life.
And when you had nightmares, I assume.
I'm not going to punch you in the face. Okay. But you know, this is good. I enjoy ham exposition.
All right, thank you.